Welcome to the Phylum Mollusca video. Molluscs are things that you'd probably be fairly familiar with, a very diverse group of animals. And probably you're familiar with them because you've probably eaten a fair few of them. Squid, scallops, pippies, octopus, then other things like scaphopods and nudibranchs. So we are going to look at the general characteristics and also the class called Polyplacophora, which are the Chitons in this video. Okay, for this video, you will be able to, after watching this, you'll be able to define or describe the general characteristics of mollusks. And one class, we will look at some of the other classes and orders on the next videos of mollusks. And identifying common New Zealand mollusks is part of your shell collection. So these are your objectives for phylum Mollusca. So what are mollusks? Okay, here we have some black rock snails. So these are the gastropod snails. We have octopus, cephalopods. These are things like squid and also nautilus, cuttlefish. These are scaphopod shells. This is actually a 400-year-old Maori necklace that was made of scaphopod shells. Here is a sea hare, which is releasing this noxious cloud of ink, much like a squid or an octopus. Here's its close cousin, the other shellless gastropod called a nudibranch. Here's a limpet. There's a flame file shell. This is a type of bivalve, very much like a scallop or a pippy. The general characteristics of mollusks. All right, they're bilaterally symmetrical. And then in order to recognize a mollusk, you need to know that they have three different parts of their body. And all mollusks have these. There is the muscular foot, which is what they generally crawl along on, but can be specialized into tentacles, and for example, an octopus. They have a mantle, which is like a blanket that goes over the body, and that secretes the shell. Not all mollusks have shells, but a lot of them do. And then they have essentially a bag of guts called the visceral mass. So that's the internal organs within a body cavity. So here, let's have a look at the way the mollusk is put together. So you have your foot, right? That's a big muscle. That's the part that you eat in paua. You're eating the muscle, just like you'd eat in a cow or any other animal. Generally, we eat muscles. Okay, so this is the foot. And then you have a mantle, which is, let's draw it out here, it's like the skin fold that goes along the edge of the shell. And when you have a shell, the mantle will be shaped the same as the opening of the shell. And so because the mantle secretes the shell is secreted at the margins of the mantle. And that is a covering for this visceral mass, okay, which is essentially the bag of guts. Now, they generally have external gills. Not all of them do, though. They have eyes, very well-developed eyes in certain species, and tentacles. These are the ones that the tentacles are the ones that if you touch them in a snail, they sort of retract very quickly. And some of you will know what I'm talking about. They're mostly dioecious, so they're either male or female. A few hermaphrodites, but mostly male or female. They have planktonic larva, which is called a trochophore, which is free-swimming and metamorphosizes into a settling adult, or a settling juvenile, really. They have shells generally, and they're composed of 3 layers. So the Periostracum is, for example, with this hairy whelk, you can see the outer layer. And this one, it's very apparent. It's very exacerbated. But sometimes you'll find shells that have almost like a thin skin over them. Sometimes they're hairy like this. Other times they're not. But if the shell's been sitting there long enough, that will have weathered away because it's an organic layer, and it's not made up of the calcium carbonate that the other layers are. So prismatic layer, that's the thickest part. That's the biggest part of the shell. It's crystals of calcium carbonate laid down in a sort of a like chimneys that are alongside each other, and they give it the strength. But it's also called the prismatic layer because these crystals will alter the light that goes through them. So. And obviously, we see lots of examples of shells that are quite beautiful on mollusk shells. And then finally, you get the nacreous layer, which is the same as these pearls. So a pearl is essentially all nacreous layer, just laid down on top of itself, on top of itself, on top of itself. But that's what you get the shiny bit of the internal part of the shell is the nacreous layer. Okay, so feeding and digestion. Most mollusks have something called a radula. All right, not the bivalves, but most of the other ones, they have these teeth. The radula can be formed in lots of different ways. But for example, these teeth are used, and this is probably a chiton or something like a cat's eye. This one will be a grazer, and you can see these teeth are used to scrape the algae and other organic material off of a rock and scrape it back into the stomach. Here's a nice picture of a grazing gastropod's radula coming out of its mouth. Here's the mouth, and this is used to scrape along the surface of the rock, scrape the material that's living there. The type of material such as a thin algal layer, and scrape it into the gut for digestion. But these radula can be shaped in many different ways. They can be used to bore through shell in oyster borers. They can be used for tearing apart prey in the cephalopods. They have quite a variety in structure. Alright, so these are a little more advanced in their circulatory system with chambered hearts, like ours. They don't have 4 chambers, they have 2 chambers generally. Paired kidneys and hemocyanin, so copper-based pigment. These things tend not to have clotting factors, and if you make one bleed, like we know with Pawa, the blood comes out because it's copper-based. It'll have that greeny blue color to it, and they also, without clotting, will tend to bleed to death. So be very careful and measure your Pawa before you take them off the rocks if you're a Pawa hunter. Okay, in terms of taxonomy, you'll be responsible for the black ones. Okay, Polyplacophora are chitons. The Monoplacophora and Aplacophora, they're rare, so we won't go into those. There are gastropods and bivalves, scaphopods, and cephalopods. So we're just going to look at the class Polyplacophora in this video, and then call it, and then be finished with this video. So you'll recognize these from being down at the rocky shore. These are called chitons. Go to a rocky coastal area and turn over a couple of rocks, and you'll find many of these things underneath the surface, hiding away until they can come out and graze at night. All right, so many mollusks will have 1 shell. The bivalves will have 2 shells. The Polyplacophorans, or poly meaning many, and Placophora. Not really sure what that means, but anyway, many plates. So these have always eight plates, and then a girdle, which is what you call the edge of the mantle, covering or going around the outside. All right, so that is the girdle, all right, which is the edge of the mantle, and then the 8 plates or valves, what we call valves. And here is the underside of the chiton, Polyplacophora. You see, here's the mouth with a radula that would come out. Here is the muscular foot. Okay, the mantle will be here, and it'll be sort of it'll essentially it's going to be the outer part of the animal, right out to the outside edge, because the plates don't quite cover the entire mantle. And you can see the water going past the gills, and then underneath the muscular foot is the visceral mass. Okay, gonopore, that would mean, I'm sure you can figure out what gono and pore means. And nephridio, which means kidney, is right there, so that's where they wee. Alright, so they've got a separate mouth and anus. So what type of gut is that? It's a one way, of course. So that's it for general characteristics of mollusks, plus the class Polyplacophora, or the chitons. See you in the next video.